Welcome to the CBIA BizCast. I'm your host, Ali Warshavsky, and today on our podcast, we are speaking with lawyer Keegan Drenosky of Shipman Goodwin, LLP. In a time where companies are struggling to recruit and retain employees, she's here to offer some legal advice and insight into how companies can keep their employees. First off, Keegan, why don't you explain what you do for Shipman Goodwin LLP clients that gives you insight into these trends of employees and employers?
Sure. So first of all, thanks so much for having me. It's nice to be here. So I am an attorney, as you mentioned, with Shipman Goodwin. I'm in our employment practice, and my practice mainly focuses on defending employers in various litigations involving discrimination, wrongful termination, and things like that. But a large part of our practice, and especially over the past several years when we had litigation slowing down, has really been just providing advice to employers on types of things that they can do to avoid getting to a situation where they're having to defend themselves in those types of positions. So, a lot of that has to do with complying with various federal and state laws, having employees that are happy in the workplace, and staying with their employer because they're feeling valued and things like that. So that's a lot of what I do on the day to day. It's just being on the phone with people and going through questions they might have related to what the laws are. So it's sort of given us, especially over the past few years, insight into how things have changed and what employees are valuing today.
And did COVID really change that job for you? I know things have been really changing over the past few years just because technology upgrades and things like that. But I'm assuming from what I've heard from our HR counsel, this kind of just propelled it forward at a speed no one was prepared for.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think before, the pandemic, we really had people that were used to working in the office every day, having to switch on a dime to, going remote and all the challenges that brought. And I think how well employers have sort of risen to that challenge, has really affected the culture of companies over the past few years and going forward as well. And so I think as an attorney, it's been interesting to jump into that role of sort of learning all the new laws that have to do with employers working from home and working remotely, and what that looks like as opposed to your more traditional job force.
And what are some strategies that employers are using to recruit employees across industries? I know that has been a big problem and a focus of our policy priorities this legislative session, of getting people back into the workforce or recruiting employees from out of state to come here to Connecticut.
Yeah, it's a very competitive job market right now for talent. Things have sort of changed over the past few years, from people being worried about not having jobs to now employees really having a lot of agency to sort of push for what they value in the workplace. And we've seen, obviously compensation is important, and there's a lot of competition in that area, but it's not everything. And especially, if an employer or a company isn't able to sort of offer the top of the market in terms of salary, they're using other things like a signing bonus or other tools that really focus on benefits and what the workplace culture is going to look like. And offering benefits, wellness benefits, health benefits, paid leave, things of that nature that really focus on work-life balance as opposed to just, what the bottom line salary is. And really looking outside the box, even for some industries that are really finding that shortage of applying for H-1B petitions for highly skilled foreign workers to be able to fill some of the gaps. So there's definitely been some creativity in looking at how to recruit employees to the workforce.
I feel like you can't see a job ad these days that doesn't promise an extra $1,000 if you apply and are accepted to the position right then and there, which is something I had not seen before. Are there any particular strategies you'd suggest for industries like manufacturing in Connecticut that are experiencing maybe a more severe labor shortage? Because, of course, as you know, manufacturing has dealt with this pre-pandemic, and the pandemic only really escalated what they were dealing with.
Yeah, that's a great example. Is one of the industries that's really sort of looking to get creative because there is such a demand, and it's there's so much potential for the manufacturers in Connecticut. I'm part of a group called Manufacturer CT that sort of looks at these types of issues. And one of the areas that they're really looking at is focusing on investing in training programs and schools to really, start the workforce from the point where they come in and are students to provide that training opportunity, to provide training to current employees so that they might be more qualified for other positions. But also, again, even in industries like manufacturing, it's not just complying with the laws, and we've had a lot of new legislation over the past few years, especially in Connecticut. It's also making sure to sort of go that extra step and focusing on making it a workplace that people want to come and stay. So one a good example of that is now in Connecticut, we have required paid family leave through the state. Some employers go well beyond that, and they offer more time, more pay, and really focus on letting people expand their families and know that they have a life outside of work, but that they still have value to the company, even though they're allowed to take that time. Pay equity has been another thing, and focusing on opportunities for women in an area that might not have been traditionally looking at female employees and how to provide the best balance for them. So that's some of the things we've seen in both recruiting and being able to retain employees in these different industries, but especially in manufacturing where they're really focusing on this crunch of labor shortage that they're having.
I think it's interesting that you touched on is the upskilling of workers and workers valuing the fact that their company will pay to train them so that they're going to continue to move up, and that being an incentive to stay in itself. We mentioned that in manufacturing and also maybe that sign-on bonus. But what other incentives for hiring are you seeing, and what are companies offering that work and maybe don't work to get employees in the door?
I think one of the things that employees really look for now is not just, well, what is the bottom line salary, but also what is this company offering to me in terms of what my life's going to look like. So, it could be a flexible work arrangement. That's something that I think employees have always valued even pre-pandemic, but since we now have the ability for many people to work not tied to an office, whether they're coming in once a week or twice a week, or there's some sort of hybrid type situation, letting them work sort of different hours. I think employees really value those things. And that's what we've seen, that if there's the ability to do that, it not only allows employers to attract different types of people, but it also is a good incentive for keeping those people once they come to the workplace. And that can go beyond just flexible work arrangements. There's things like quality health benefits, what the career advancement is, really what the company culture is. So we've seen, especially in the younger generation, people really value inclusiveness and diversity, and seeing things like that reflected in the workplace. So those are all things that I think the current applicant pool is really concerned about, as opposed to just what the bottom line compensation is.
Yeah, definitely. I think if COVID put anything in perspective, was one, the ability to work from home, and some people who really enjoy that, and two, having good health insurance, God forbid anything happened. So that's what employees are looking for. What are employers been focused on? What types of issues are facing employers trying to recruit and retain talented employees? Obviously, part of it would be they have to offer a lot of these benefits if the company down the road that is in the same industry is too, right? If they don't offer this hybrid work schedule, but the company next door does, they're not going to look as attractive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that you sort of touched on one of the number one things that employers are doing, which is to see what their competitors are doing in this area, and trying to match it. And if they can't in terms of the salary, making sure they're offering something that those people aren't, that would, attract people. And I think when trying to put some of these things in practice, what employers need to sort of be concerned and be wary of is what this is going to look like in the long term. So, for instance, if you're going to allow most of your workforce to be remote or have some hybrid type of workforce, there's going to be new laws you need to comply with in terms of what state people are working from, and what tax laws apply, whether you have to register the employees in that state. And then there's very specific employment laws that apply based on where the person is doing the work from. So, regardless of if it's a Connecticut company, if you're hiring someone that lives in Colorado and you're going to allow them to, just come to work on Zoom and do things remotely, you have to make sure that you're complying with those laws as well, for training in harassment issues, discrimination laws. There's a sort of a myriad of different things to make sure you're up to date with. And so those are, things that employers are struggling with a little bit just to get up to speed with. And that's where sort of the outside counsel can be helpful. And we sort of do a lot of that, making sure people are, complying with everything they need to just to be in a good position.
Yeah, it seems like the best option for Connecticut right now is to figure out how to fill these labor shortages, even if they're remote positions, with Connecticut residents, because it just takes away some of the stress of figuring out these rules and regulations. But of course, the labor shortage is so great that companies are willing to hire anyone to fill these positions. We touched on, obviously, maybe your workplace doesn't have all of its employees every Monday through Friday because of a hybrid work schedule, or maybe its business is or the building is completely shut down because of remote work. But how does the workplace look different now in 2022 than it did in 2019?
I think, we've, like you said, we've talked about sort of the remote nature of the work, but really what that's done is made it a little bit smaller in terms of people are able to communicate better. There's less travel required, working across offices, across industries. But I really think the big difference is it seems like employees do have more agency to push for the things that are important to them, as opposed to sort of pre-pandemic being in a position where they might be willing to do more of what the employer wanted, and not be as concerned about what was important to them, because they needed this particular job and there wasn't as much option for them to move around. So that's, I think, really changed what employees can demand sort of in looking at filling different positions and what they're interested in.
So right now, it really seems like the employee is winning. It's really flip-flopped.
Yeah, and I think that's true, but I also think it can be a good thing, because if an employee is seeing their value in a company, they're more likely to stay, they're more likely to do good work, and that will benefit the company as a whole. And that's why I say we should focus on things like not just complying with these new laws that Connecticut has, as well as other states in the federal sphere, but also making sure that we're going beyond and telling employees that they do have value and how they can see that playing out in their career advancement within whatever the various industry is. One thing we've seen is there is some temptation to retain people by signing them into strict written agreements or non-compete type agreements that restricts employees' movement. We caution against doing that for all industries, just as a blanket policy, because there may be some legislation in the future that really restricts if those are enforceable or not. And sort of that's not really necessarily something employees that are in this job market that might have a position where they don't have to sign something like that want to see, in coming on board somewhere they have to sign some restrictive type policy. So it's just sort of a way of looking at what's the best way right now, given this market, to attract people and retain them.
Yeah, so just to recap, it sounds like don't make them sign a contract. Obviously, industry by industry is a little bit different. That paid time off, that good insurance, that flexibility is really what's important to the employee right now, and employers learning that and knowing that and offering to upskill their employees is really what's going to create a successful business right now.
Yeah, and I probably wouldn't go as far as to say don't do something, because like you said, it always varies based on the particular position or industry. But just in general, I think we've seen that the strategy of focusing on the value that people can bring and what benefits can be offered to them is more successful in recruiting the talent that people are looking to bring on board.
Well, great to know. Thank you so much, Keegan, for joining us today. I think a lot of people are going to listen to this and find it helpful as a business leader and maybe as an employee who is looking to make their next move. So we really appreciate you coming on to the BizCast.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me. And, I always encourage people to reach out to counsel for any specific legal advice, since, obviously it will vary depending on the different type of industry and employer that you are.
A good advice there. Well, thank you for listening to this week's BizCast. You can listen and subscribe to the BizCast on Apple, YouTube, and visit CBIA.com for more.